Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show. This is Neil Geddes Ward with Andy Chaplin. Andy, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, Neil. How you doing?
I'm all right. You've been quite busy over the summer, haven't you? Doing all your shows and things?
Yeah, well, it's kind of up and down, I suppose. There's a few demos I'm doing. It's of course coming up to my favourite season of the year, which is Halloween. So we're exiting August, coming into September, and then September is basically when I'm planning Halloween stuff. So that's going to be manic, manic, manic.
Cool. And you've been to quite a few events, not like your stuff, but like UFO Academy stuff, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of really interesting talks actually. The UFO Academy was back in, when was it? Either June or July. I think it was June. Yeah, very intense, hardcore stuff, and you get speaker after speaker, and there's some, so much information because each talk is about 2 hours, and you've got four speakers per day over 2 days. So that's 8 speakers. It's a lot of information to take in.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember it all?
No, well, I remember the key parts, and I do remember kind of most parts, but it's too much to take in, really remember all of it. But it's certainly interesting. But of course, the High Elms events, it's just as much about the social life and the kind of chatting to the other crazies and weirdos that go along to it. So the talks are actually part of it, but it's the camaraderie and the sharing of stories and different life experiences people have. Which is just as interesting on the patio talking away.
Do you think there's less tinfoil hat people now? The fact that 30 years ago, everyone would be a tinfoil hat, but now there's generally a lot more people that are awake and aware, as it were.
It's an interesting one. Are there more or less? I think what it is, it's these kind of subjects and topics are becoming more available to the public, and it's whereas you used to get people saying, "Oh, little green men," and finding it very funny, like that mayor who dressed up as an alien,
Oh yeah,
the idiot mayor in America. I think that kind of mentality is actually on the decline. I think people are saying, almost accepting, kind of, there is something out there. We might not know exactly what it is, but there is something out there. And I think there's quite a shift. Whether there's going to be actual disclosure, I don't know. I don't think we're going to get it from the mainstream. But put it this way, Neil, there's a lot of friends that would have poo-pooed it a few years ago who are now beginning to realize that there's something awry. And a lot of the things that David Icke was talking about, such as global paedophile networks, that everyone used to say, "Oh, that's mad, that's crazy," and now you've got Jeffrey Epstein and the royal family, that whole shebang that's happening at the moment. So it's interesting. The things that people thought were mad, crazy, tinfoil hat stuff are beginning to be shown as true.
There definitely does seem to be a shift, and things are changing.
I think so. I think it is a global consciousness thing. I think it is people. There's too much information out there now. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of fakes. There's a lot of people putting Photoshop stuff and CGI stuff. You can usually spot the CGI stuff because it just looks so fake. But in amongst that, there's little slithers of actual very interesting unexplainable footage. Yeah.
Well, there's one person that might be helping us shift in the right direction, is our next guest, who is speaking from the Azores. Do you know where the Azores are, Andy?
Pacific, is it? Where
No,
are we?
almost. It's in the Atlantic, in the
It's the other side of
Atlantic.
the world. Close
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show, Patricia Cori.
Hello, Patricia.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you.
And how is it in the Azores today?
Gorgeous. As I'm talking to you, I'm looking out my window. We don't have chemtrails here very, very rarely, but we have white puffy clouds, bright blue sky, and I have a rainbow right out the window. So there you go.
Well, what more can you ask for?
Not much.
How big is the Azores, out of interest?
Well, there are 9 islands in this complex called the Azores, the Azorian,
Archipelago, is that?
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And most of the people here know that somehow this is Atlantis. The Azorian people know it's Atlantis. It's so funny when I first got, if we get a chance to talk about my story, how I ended up here. When I flew over it, I realized, oh my God, this is Atlantis. Oh my God. And when I got down, the plane landed, and there's Atlantis insurance, Atlantis car rental, Atlantis pizza. I'm like, oh, maybe the people get it.
they're already awake and aware by the sounds of it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Azorian sounds like an alien race anyway, so you might as well.
It does, yeah.
Well, the thing is that when you read Plato's writings, he talked about Atlantis being outside the Pillars of Hercules, which of course is the Straits of Gibraltar, and that's where the Azores is.
So, is it volcanic?
Very. In fact, people say to me, you do like to live on the wild side, don't you? And my attitude is, well, you name me a place that's safe on planet Earth, geophysically speaking. And the bottom line is live your life. You never know when it's time to blow, it's time to go.
Right. Wow. So I mean, obviously you can tell us if you want how you end up there, but you've got beginnings. I mean, before you're there, you were where, in the United States living?
No, I left the United States 32. Well, let me see. I left the United States in 83.
Wow.
I lived in Italy for 32 years.
Wow.
And then I broke up with my partner, and I came here. But the story of how I ended up here is quite remarkable. You want to hear it?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I was channeling a book called Messages from the Great World. It was called, Before We Leave You, Messages from the Great Whales and the Dolphin Beings. And it was because I started hearing messages from them about their beachings and about the trouble in the oceans, the military sonic terror that's happening in the oceans. And I was experiencing this in dreams, in channeling it, whatever. And I started to prepare this book. And I said to myself, well, I can't really represent the whales and dolphins unless I get in the water, because otherwise I'm a fraud. So in order to get in the water with dolphins, wild dolphins, meant I had to face my greatest fear, which is sharks. So I decided to come. I looked at where would be the most possible reality for me to go swim with wild dolphins. And this tour agent said, you've either got Egypt, which is pretty mild because they come in and out every day into this bay, or the Azores, which is really wild and much more difficult. And I said, Azores it is. And so I came here. I'm convinced that they called me here. And after about 4 days, there was a sighting there were 250 dolphins.
Wow.
And if you know anything about dolphins, they're always moving. I mean, they're moving. They swim. That's what they do. They're hunting. They're whatever they're doing.
Called a
migrating.
pod, isn't it? Is it a pod of dolphins?
Yeah, but this was a gigantic megapod because it was 250 to 300 dolphins. And they were resting. And the guy that was running the boat said, yeah, I don't know who you are and what you do, but this is abnormal. He said, they're just sitting there. They're just not moving. There were no other boats in the water. And off I went. And I jumped into the water with all these dolphins. And I was in the water with them for almost 2 hours. They were just relaxing. They were not moving. And I had the mega galactic dose, like a spiritual bumper crop of energy from this experience. It changed my life completely. And I said, I need to live here.
Wow.
And I took all my savings and put a down payment on a house with no clue why. And then years later, when the breakup came, I said, oh, I know why. And so I moved here 3 years ago. So I'm quite happy. Very remote, as far as civilization as I can be, and that's fine with me. And just a beautiful, almost idyllic environment.
And do you have to speak the local language to try and get on?
No, the language is Portuguese, but in the schools here, the second language is English. So because it's also a tourist spot, a lot of people speak English. And I've got the Italian. I'm fluent in Italian. So what I can't figure out in English, I hunt and peck. And Latin languages are so similar that I
they kind of cross talk a little bit, don't they? Similar words, and Italians regard Spanish and as their cousins and stuff. So it's all part and parcel.
I see where it is. So it's quite close to kind of, well, I say close. It's Morocco is another country. I don't know if there's an influence of Arabic in the Azores.
No, not so much. There is in the southern Algarve and the southern coasts of Portugal. There's quite a Moorish Moroccan influence there, but not so much out here.
Mm.
It's quite a far out. It's a 2 hours and 40-minute flight from Lisbon. So it's, it's not right off the coast.
What's the population there?
On my island, it's 15,000. It's underpopulated. I'm so happy.
Wow. That's quite a lot of people, because I lived in the Orkney Islands, again, an archipelago of islands, and that's off the north coast of Scotland, and there's only about somewhere in the region of 30,000 people that live there. It might even be less. I can't remember now. Might even be, I think it's 10. I think it's about 30,000 roughly. But I lived on one of the outer islands where there's only about 600 people that lived on one of the outer islands. And then the further islands you go out, you end up with like 50 people or 20 people. It gets really remote. Yeah. But you do see dolphins up there. You see killer whale, things like that as well. So,
well, I'm hoping to see them. I'll be speaking in Ireland in November, and I'm going to go try to get to Orkney.
Well, if you need any tips about getting to Orkney or where to stay or what to see, give me a shout, because I'll be happy to help you.
I would love.
I lived there for 4 years, and my children still live up there. They're both grown up now, but I still go up there, and so it's familiar territory to me. So yeah, I can help you on that.
I will take you up on that for sure.
No problem. No problem. So you mentioned channeling a book then. So you were previously, if I understand this right, a radio host, similar to what we're doing, but you presented a show of your own.
Yes.
How did you go from being a radio host to channeling books?
Well, it was kind of the other way around. Let's say that I have been a very psychic, clairvoyant, clairaudient all of my life. And even beginning in childhood, as far back as before I can remember, but tales from my mother about the bizarre things I would see and tell her about. And this accelerated with time, and finally, just intuitive, empathic. And then, when you use these faculties, as I'm sure you're aware, Andy and Neil, the more you use these skills, the more they intensify.
It is. It's like going to the gym, isn't it? It
really is. It's psychic gym. And the beautiful thing about it is when you can turn it on rather than have it just flash when it wants to. And I developed quite a lot of skill with that. So that by the time I was, let's see. Well, in 1996, I got into my first crop circle. And before I went into the crop circle, I was in England doing a color therapy course in an institute. And I had a dream that I was flying over Stonehenge, and I saw this spiral in the field. And I identified this. I didn't know what it was, but I just remember waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a voice say, "This is a lock on point for interdimensional contact, and you need to be very aware of it. So pay attention. Wake up, wake up." And I was like, okay, what was that? And didn't know about crop circles then. So in the course of a few days, when people got a buzz about what I'd seen, we found out that there was the amazing Julia set crop circle in the field across from Stonehenge, identical in dimensions and proportions to what I'd seen in the dream, which provoked, let's use the word provoked, the professor to say, that's what you're really here for. And I'm taking you there because you obviously have a reason to be there.
Prompted.
And that's the word. Thank you. And when I got into that crop circle, I had a huge out of body experience, like none I'd ever had before. And I really believe I was being tuned up then, because I was out of my body for 2 hours. And when I came back, I started receiving these messages that had started in 1996. And I had never used the skill of mediumship per se, but it just kept pouring out. Book after book after book. I've got 14 books out now.
Wow.
So I finally just yielded to it and said, okay, I'm happy to be a vessel for this information. And that's been my journey. And very exciting.
Does the information come from different sources or one main source, and do they correlate?
It comes from primarily a source of disincarnate beings on the 6th dimension called the Sirian High Council.
Right.
And this is a council of beings that are no longer in form, that are vibrating at a frequency that is two dimensions higher than ours, if we can use the word higher. So that they have light body, but they don't have physical form. And on this council, there are ascended masters, there are dolphins and whales, because dolphins and whales, you probably are well aware, are not only Earth beings, they exist in many other stations of the universe and in many other dimensions. And apparently there are a couple of Pleiadians on the council, etc. So it's a collective of beings, light beings, that are concerned and involved with the progress of, particularly at this time, of our solar system, but not limited to by any means.
I think even mainstream science said that they can't quite work out what octopuses or octopi are, and think that if there's any alien creature on this planet, it would be the octopi.
I really agree with that. I just recently saw this latest group of them with the illumination and the neon lighting. This one of them looks like Times Square.
And they're very intelligent, hugely intelligent.
They are.
Didn't one pull ping pong balls and predict football matches or something?
Yeah, I mean, there was the whole psychic octopus thing, but also I don't know if you've seen videos of the octopus mazes. They've created kind of a clear, transparent maze full of water, put an octopus in, and in order for it to get its food, it has to do these challenges, things like opening lids and closing things with rods and doors and things like that, and you need a fair degree of intelligence to do it, and it works out each stage, going through one room by the next until it gets to its food. Very, very intelligent.
I do. That is very exciting. I really do personally think that we've got so many alien life forms on the planet. Of course, that opens up a whole nother kettle of worms, which is, aren't we aliens? It's Homo sapiens alien.
Yeah, it's like we could be one big menagerie of creatures being put here. Octopus, people, monkeys, apes, dolphins.
I mean, who is to decide what is the indigenous life form to this planet? What if it was just a perfected environment of a balance of nature and water, and let's say earth, water, and air, and then some beings from other worlds decided to nest different species here? Very possible.
Maybe what we're interpreting as evolution could be various things or experiments they've been trying over millions of years or something.
Yeah, well, this missing link theory is really old. I mean, come on, guys. You're claiming that you're the scientific voice and you're still clinging to the missing link theory. It's like junk DNA. The scientists, the doctors talk about our DNA and that 80% is junk, and I'm like, really? You get to get away with calling 80% of the human form junk, and you call that science, and that's okay?
Yeah.
Who's the fool here?
I mean, one of our guests previously was Simon Parks, who's a very interesting guy. And what he said about the junk DNA thing is that it's not junk; it's just that it's been turned off.
Well, that's right.
Mainstream scientists call it junk because they don't know what it does. Where in fact we should be a lot more connected with spirit and other dimensions. We should be highly psychic, all of us, and we should be intuitive and a lot cleverer. But it's almost like certain parts of our DNA have been turned off, switched off, and dumbed down to keep us as basically servile slaves to whatever, the global.
Well, that's exactly one of the main theories and themes in my books.
Yeah.
That we are 12-stranded DNA beings.
Yeah.
We were created because, according to the Sirian High Council, we were nested on this planet. I was alluding to it in my last comment as 12-stranded, fully illuminated beings by species that were intent upon creating a light being, highly spiritual master race on the planet. And then for purposes that involved alien intervention, whatever, we were stripped down to 2, meaning the disassembling or disconnect, as you said, Adam. Andy, sorry,
That's all right. Don't worry.
Had a brain fart. As you said, for somehow these strands were unplugged or disconnected or whatever, and then we were taken down to two strands, and that is duality. So we were taken down at the genetic level to the genetic form of duality, which is very interesting.
What do you think the word illuminated means to? Because we've got our version of what we think illuminated is in terms of like awake and aware and enlightened. To the global elitists, the dark lot, what do you think illuminated means to them?
Oh boy, well, that's a very big question. I mean, do they think of about you? You're talking about the Illuminati, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because when we think of illuminated, we want to be illuminated. What we're saying is we want to be enlightened. We want to be ascended. We want to be, connected to a light body and spiritual, etc. When they talk about illuminated, it's more nudge, nudge, wink, wink, roll your sleeves up or your trousers leg, and cause mass destruction in the world, and the Georgia Guidestones culling the population. I think they have a very different view of what illuminated is, and I was wondering what your take is.
Well, I think that their idea of illuminated is that they know the truth as they see it, and that they're in obedience to what they believe is a God force, which we perceive as a satanic force. And for them, that's the light.
Do they? This is an interesting one. Do they think or know that they're being evil, or do you think that in their mindset they think, well, we've got a rat infestation, we need to deal with it for the sake of the planet, and that rat infestation is humans?
Yeah, that's a really wonderful discussion to have. And the bottom line is, if it's coming from an idea of altruism where they feel that the greater good is to annihilate 7 million people, denies the reality of them eating children and drinking their blood and all these horrifically torturous rituals. I think they feed on the ritual and the pain, and that it's not just an altruism, because you don't have to rape and pillage and burn and do all this satanic stuff with the intent of reducing the population on the planet, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
So I think that they feed on the fear, and that's why they want to keep us in fear. They get empowered by the vibratory frequency of fear and despair.
I think politically that's why everything's so divisive. I've never known an age that's more kind of, you're either in Brexit or against Brexit. You're either Trump or you're Hillary. You're either this or you're that.
That's right.
It's like it's magnified 100 times over.
Well, George Bush gave us this one-liner: "You're either with us or you're with the enemy."
Yeah, no, nothing in between. No kind of like shades in between.
Yeah, and then define what us is. By the way, Mr.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be a start, wouldn't it? It's like Obama bought hope and change. Well, Stalin bought change. Mao bought change.
Exactly.
Define the change.
But you look at some of the, like Bill Gates with his Bill Gates Foundation and his altruism, that he openly admits that we have to reduce some population for the planet, for the good of the planet. And I'm like, yeah, that's great unless you're being depopulated.
Well, this is it. Yeah, you go first, guys. Off you go, Bill.
Bill, you going to vaccinate your children anytime soon?
Oh, no, I'm not going to vaccinate my children, just yours.
Exactamente.
So with the channeling of the book then, Patricia, you've done quite a few of them now. Is it always from the same beings, or like Andy's saying, are they from different sources, or generally the same beings?
They're generally this committee of beings, and on this committee of beings, as I said, are whales and dolphins. So I had 2 books that were focused from this group of souls, a collective soul of cetaceans, who spoke through. But yes, I resonate with that, with the Sirian High Council, and the books are called the Sirian Revelations, and it refers to quite a large body of work.
So with the Sirian Revelations, because there's lots of different people through the last maybe 50, 60 years, maybe even further back. I'm going back maybe to the 1950s, that have kind of started to channel higher beings, if for want of a better word. I'm thinking people like George Adamski. Recently, we spoke to Ananda Sirasena, who's a member of the Aetherius Society, who was, I think it was Sir George King or Dr. King, George King, who was, I believe, based in London originally, and then he started to work with. I'm not sure who they were now, but it became known as the Aetherius Society, but some sort of alien race, maybe Venusians or something. But I might be confusing my different channelers here.
Jane
But
Roberts as well.
Jane Roberts, well, she just channeled one being, and that was just
Seth.
Seth, and
Yeah.
he wasn't claiming to be from any particular kind of galaxy or planet or anything
No.
like that. He
No.
was just a kind of well, he called himself a personality essence, no longer focused in the physical.
Yes, but he was an ascended master.
An ascended master, spirit guide type of
Oh,
person,
you've
perhaps.
also got Aleister Crowley. Didn't he draw the being that he thought he was channeling, and it turned out to be like a grey?
Did it really?
I think so. It's one of the old school ones, and it's definitely on the dark side. This wasn't a positive one. I think it was Crowley. I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
look it up.
Crowley was working on the dark side, so anything that he would be channeling would probably not be of interest to me from the point of view of, it seems to be a lot easier to conjure up lower astral beings than it is to keep the purity of a channel that is coming in from higher levels.
So your messages are they similar to maybe some of these other channels, or have you got a completely different message you're putting out there?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, because I avoid other channeled material because for two reasons. One, I don't want to taint the channel so that there's a blur of information that I've picked up from anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, I don't resonate with a lot of the other information that's coming out.
Yeah.
So I can tell you a few of the channels that I have found to be very quite extraordinary, and one of them is absolutely Jane Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
Extraordinary information.
Are you a fan of Bashar and Darryl Anka?
No, I don't listen to. Well, bless him, I just can't get over the screaming.
Screaming? Does he do screaming? I haven't seen that one.
Oh yeah, he only screams when he channels. He screams.
Hello.
I am Bashar.
I am Bashar. Good evening to you all.
And I do not mean any negative commentary about him, because obviously he's got quite an audience, but I just I couldn't get past. I don't like theater, and a lot of channels tend to be theatrical, and it's a turnoff for me. In fact, I don't ever channel in front of people because I don't want to turn the work into a show. That's not to say that these are beings that are not trustworthy. I just don't resonate with it. So as far as me being different than other channels, I suppose one thing that I would say is that the information is very grounded. So unlike a lot of material, which is everything's going to be wonderful, good aliens are coming, we're going to open the skies, there's going to be a great arrival, the ships are ready, we're going to take up all the big guys. And there's a lot of this out there that, the event is coming and everybody get ready and, hallelujah. My material from the council is very grounded. There's a lot of controversial information dating back to the 20 years already about HARP, about chemtrails, about chipping, about all these issues that have now come to the foreground, about cloning, etc. And that the message from these beings is you need to understand the dark side. You can't just nest yourselves in the light, what your perception of the light side is, because you're in a duality situation. You have to be willing to look at it, face it, and effect change on it. And one of the beautiful lines in the Sirian material is they say, it's easy to shine light into light. It's a no-brainer. Your mission is to shine light into the darkness. And to do that, you need to understand it. And further, you need to have enough compassion and strength to affect it.
What if your understanding of it is that they are just a bunch of arseholes? I mean, what's the counter to just a bunch of arseholes?
Well, that's really good, because if you think that the dark force is that weak, then you have more power over it, because fear is what they feed on. So if you think they're just a bunch of assholes, much easier to affect change there. Whereas if you fear them, they've got you.
Yeah.
But I think the problem that we have is they're a bunch of arseholes, but they control the media and the masses lap up the media. So we're here kind of looking around saying, okay, bunch of arseholes running the show, let's change it, try and talk to people, and they're just parroting off the mainstream news version of reality.
Well, then we must be doing something right, because the censorship program that they're trying every way possible to do means they're scared of the alternative voice.
Oh, I know, yeah. I know I mean, they are on the back foot, but I want to kind of like help put more monkey wrenches into the system.
Yes, I hear you. That's my mission too.
Well, this doing our show with Patricia is one little monkey wrench in the system.
That's true.
Absolutely.
That is true.
And it takes, I want people to always understand something, the people that are listening now and people that read my books, etc. There are people who are going to be spirit warriors, and I'm one, and you guys are too, by the nature of putting your ass out there with controversial information to try to awaken the troops. And there are the great warriors at the front of the battalion. There are warriors, there are light workers, there's all kinds of degrees of people. Some people are just going to be, a light beam, a light post, and that's okay too. But more and more, we are realizing that this is the big battle here, dark and light. And I don't see them as a bunch of assholes, to be honest with you. I see this force of darkness as very organized, very evil, very intent upon pain and suffering, and enjoying creating that pain and destroying innocence. That's a big one. It seems this is one of the reasons why pedophilism is so sweeping. It's not only about sex. People don't get this. It's about destroying innocence and beauty. And so we've really got our work cut out for us, to say the least.
It's really hilarious how the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, where he was in a prison cell, which was supposed to have 24-hour, surveillance and guards checking up on him, and it just so happens that he just so happens to have information on high-profile people, just so happens to commit suicide, just so happens to have written a will 2 days beforehand, and as it happens, the cameras were miraculously malfunctioning at the same time.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to believe that's just a coincidence. And then Trump puts out a tweet and all the mainstream media jump on it as a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy full stop. It's just a conspiracy. That's what it is. Whoever's behind it, whether it's Hillary's lot or whether it's, the deep state lot, but it's not, if that was a suicide, then I'm the next pope.
You seriously don't think that a network of people who are trafficking children, who have control of all of this money, A, political influence, B, transport, C, et cetera, not to mention underground bunkers and rail systems underground that we don't even know about, they're going to let one of their own just go to court? It's never going to happen. The longer it was sitting there, the more I understood immediately, okay, they're going to play this out. He's going to do his jail time, and right before it's time for court, he's going to disappear.
Yeah.
And so they staged that first little marks on his neck number. And, then this, and, everything malfunctioned, not unlike 911. Oopsie doodle.
Yeah.
Oopsie doodle. The air radar went out for whatever. Nobody seemed to catch. Look, we've got this underground, what's it called? I always forget the name of it. Command post in the United States that can see a fly over the World Tower building, but it can't see a plane coming in.
NORAD.
NORAD, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it can see a fly 8 million miles away, but it can't see jets zooming on in over Manhattan into the towers. And it's the same here. It's just, you know, this guy is probably raping Cuban miners after he took the train to Havana, underground train. Little nose job, and there you have it.
So, your people that you're in contact with, the Syrian race, can I call them that? If are they human, more advanced humans than us, or they're completely different level of being?
They come from a series of well, the Sirian star system is a 3-dimensional, and I mean 3 different dimensions, sister star system. So you've got Sirius A, which is in the 3rd dimension. That's the blue star that we see in the sky that is at the bottom of Orion's belt. If you follow Orion's belt, you know which one. Yep. Then there's Sirius B, which ascended into the 6th dimension. And then there's Sirius C, which ascended into the 4th dimension. So 3 stars that are from the same star system in 3 different dimensions. And the beings that I'm in contact with are connecting with me from the 6th dimension from Sirius B.
Right. And
now, this is a very interesting aspect because it delves into, and they delve into, the fact that one of the reasons why they're so interested in Earth affairs is because our planet is ascending to the 4th dimension, as is our sun. So the concept in the books, the early books, is the sun is traversing into a higher dimension. It's going into the 4th dimension. In fact, we're already entering this dimension, which I hope we will talk about. And they have experienced ascension. So they are trying to help us get our heads around what's coming, what we're going through, because they've been through it, which is quite an interesting concept. And again, very different than other. You asked me what was the difference between my stuff and some of the other stuff. And that's a very important thread that is woven through all the books. 14 books.
So when you're actually the process of channeling, how do you, I mean, Jane Roberts used to sort of just say, oh, I feel Seth around. Then within a few minutes, she threw her glasses off and away she went. She was talking for Seth. Is it a similar process for you?
No, I'm not a trance channel.
Okay.
So the first time I ever channeled them, after I got back from England and having been in the crop circle, I went about 2 days after I got back from England. In the middle of 4 o'clock in the morning, I went down to the computer and completely trance channeled the first 3 pages of the book, Cosmos of Soul. And when I came out of this trance, I looked and said, what is this? Powerful, very powerful information. But I was not connected to it. I had no awareness of having done that other than to see it on the computer.
You just typed it without being consciously aware.
I was absolutely not conscious of doing that. I was like automatic writing, whatever you want to call it, but unconsciously. And then the next day I was completely conscious, and I've always been. But unlike some channels that can sit on a stage and start, you know, put their head down and go, okay, I'm channeling Jesus, I'm channeling whatever. For me, there's a lot of preparatory work. I work with crystals, I work with sound, and I prepare myself because I feel that I have to raise my frequency to a certain level, and they have to come down energetically, vibrationally to reach that level. And then there's a kismet where we connect, and that's how I channel.
That's almost very reminiscent of the way you describe it there with what I recollect Jane Robertson and Seth doing, is that he would sort of step down like a transformer, and she would step up, and where they met in the middle of consciousness, in this playing field of consciousness, the Seth phenomena would occur. So it was like a bit of her and a bit of him, and what came through was a kind of a mixture of the 2 flavors, if you like.
That's exactly right, because I don't believe for a minute that I'm connecting to the 6th dimension, because at that point I feel like I would no longer be able to hold body. I would be, it would be just impossible to hold resonance at that frequency for so many hours, channeling 300 and 350 page books. Rather, I feel that that's exactly right. It's like a transducer. They know where the vibratory frequency. Look, it's like a radio station. We take for granted that you just turn the dial, at least in the old days, and you turn in all these stations without thinking about the fact that there's a frequency that you've got to find, attune to. The technology has to attune to that pattern or frequency or code or whatever you want to call it to be able to bring in that information. And it's the same for me. I think it's the same for real channels. You're using your neurons to be able to reach a frequency that for some reason some psychics are able to hear or receive, that perhaps they're using a part of their brain that other people are not using. Does that make sense?
Yep. And so when you're doing this, is it quite draining on you to do this process?
I tell you what, it's so invigorating that I kind of become quite selfless while it's happening. I feel that I'm in service and that I'm learning, and it's just like it's using every capacity I have of brain power to be able to keep the frequency, to keep able to hold it. Sometimes it drops, I can't hold it. And then we just go back the next morning. But I do it. What's draining is the 4 o'clock wake up call.
Oh my God.
Why 4 o'clock? You want to know?
Yeah, please tell us why 4 o'clock?
Because the Sirians say that they call it the violet hour of Gaia. And they say that at 4 o'clock, first of all, the most amount of deaths and births occur at 4 o'clock. Because that is the clearest the frequencies are between morning and night of on the planet. And there's a violet hue as night. It's really very poetic. As the ink of night starts to yield to light, there's a violet hue that starts to emanate. And that frequency, that vibratory frequency of that aspect of spectra of light facilitates us being able to reach that frequency.
Would this explain why a lot of people tend to see spirits at night around that time?
Yes.
Well,
if you consider that scientists say that the most amount of deaths and births occur very close to 4 in the morning. So that makes total sense why it's easier to move in and out. It's very exciting, isn't it?
It is. Wow. So you have to like what channel is it, like a 3-hour stint or something you're doing, and then
well, they wake me up at 4 in the morning, and it's like when I'm doing an entire book, I know I'm going to be doing this for months on end. And so, when I did the first book, I had a job, so that was entertaining. But soon after, I was able to I opened a healing center. I was able to become my own master, if you will, and schedule my life around it. But 14 books, that's a lot of books.
Wow.
And a lot of my life has been dedicated to bringing in these wonderful teachings. And there have been a lot of 4 a.m. wake-up calls. In fact, my publisher just asked me if there's anything new coming. And my new book is the new Sirian Revelations, which came out in 2018. And I said, no, not for the moment. I need a break. So I'm not doing any channeling right now, at least not for books.
I remember that when Jane Roberts, I'd always read the extra notes that Robert Butts, her husband, would put in around the book of each book. And one of the things I remember them saying is that they could maybe go 3 or 4 months without channeling part of the book. Seth would come through, but he would be talking to his class, the ESP class that he held in New York with Jane and Rob and the students. And he might do personal readings for people and things like that. And then maybe 3 months later, they'd pick up the book where they left off. And Seth would automatically just come straight in with the next sentence that they'd written 4 months earlier, and there'd be no kind of where were we? It was just straight in. He would have it straight, as if calling up a computer file and then carrying straight on. I
That's
mean,
exactly right. It's exactly that way for me. And it's
I was
always
going to ask that. Was it like that for you? Yeah, yeah.
sometimes I'll be in the middle of a sentence because a lot of the material is very complex. So they're talking about simultaneous reality and parallel universes. And, there'll be a sentence that's something like, so when you recognize your multidimensionality as being on a film between two universes where you are coexisting, and I go, coexisting where? Coexisting, and it disappears. I'm like, please, let's finish the sentence. At least I need to finish this. And then 3 or 4 days later, right there, coexisting as entities as if there was no interruption whatsoever.
Wow, wow.
And that is it's challenging because
that's
in
what you
the
call a
3D
cliffhanger.
world, yeah, but in the 3D world where we still live,
yeah,
you have to write this stuff. You have to give it to a publisher. You have deadlines. It's not like you can, guys, whenever you're back, be nice. So it's quite there's a lot of trust that needs to be there. And it's always been very fluid and very,
when
very
they're coming through you, does it appear as like a group of consciousness, or is it an individual? Like Seth seemed to be an individual.
I have 3 primary speakers, but I know because in psychic visions, I've seen them sitting around a table, let's call it a board table, which is more like a congealing of different spirit beings. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there are 3 primary beings. One of them, I call him the scientist. It's like the geology, the one of the chapters in Cosmos of Soul is called the geometry of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the scientist. Very complex. Well, and not that complex because they've delivered in a way that a child can understand it, but it's really alternative thinking. The geometry of consciousness and how vibratory frequencies work and all this stuff, very scientifically presented. Then there's another speaker, and I don't know what I call that speaker, but it's an urgency for us to rise up and take action to change the world, to change our lives, to get with the program. And then finally, a third voice is this very loving, almost godlike, fatherly voice. That's message is, you're always, don't forget, you're always where you need to be in the racing of your mind to achieve, to accomplish. Don't forget that there is a perfection in all existence, and you are that perfection. So there's that beautiful, comforting over voice with the scientist, and then this other voice that's like, there are things you can do. You've got blah, 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 blah.
The political activist in between the two, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Wow. So they kind of blend their energies together and then produce one book at a time with you, and you can kind of it all kind of comes together, even though it seems to be 3 beings working through you.
Well, they take turns. So I've got one
I
book that,
see.
like The Cosmos of Soul, it starts out with a narrative about man's role. Sorry for the gender problem.
Yeah.
Human's role in civilization and yada yada. And then the scientist comes in with the geometry of consciousness, and that it all flows together. They take turns. And it's not like 3 individuals so much speaking as 3 different vibratory signatures, connecting with my own ability, my own consciousness to imprint my mind with the vibratory essence of what they want to say.
Wow. So it's almost like a little orchestra playing their different instruments to produce one kind of song or message, if you like, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, that's a very beautiful way to look at it, because they talk so much about the fact that the universe is a symphony, that everything is music, every single living being has its note, its primary note, and that everything is designed to play the symphony of consciousness.
Now, you say that they're also leading other places, other planets or star systems into a fourth dimension as well as Earth. Is that right?
No, what I said was that our solar system is moving into the fourth dimension.
Right. Okay.
So that
Okay.
involves all of the planets in our system and moons and everything. And, you know, it's interesting because we are seeing some very huge distortions of the sun at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing, I've seen images from NASA where there's a hole in the middle of the sun, for example, and you can see the stars on the other side.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, yeah. It's the NASA Halio imaging. I've seen a picture that they call it the keyhole in the sun. You can see right through it. So that our perception of the sun as being this finite, gaseous, celestial form is shifting.
How are they explaining this away?
They're not. They're saying they're plasma.
So they're just saying we don't know what's going on. It's just,
that's what they're saying.
Wow.
And just like we recently, a few days ago, they showed us pictures of the black hole in the middle of our galaxy, explosions and glowing lights, and it doesn't fit anything that they've ever known about black holes. And they're saying, we don't know what this is. We're baffled. That's the word scientists use. They're baffled. They're always baffled. We're nuts, but they're baffled.
Right. So when we move into the fourth dimension, all this solar system will not be here. Is this what you're saying?
It will not be in the density of 3 dimensions as we understand it. Andy, are you the one who heard my talk at Aware and Awake?
Yeah, I did go to it. I'd missed some of it though because I arrived a little bit late. But yeah, okay. I caught some of it.
So the concept of the council is that the idea of dimensions. Okay, I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. Try to simplify multidimensional reality in 25 words or less. The concept is that we perceive, because we are still limited to perceptionally to linear thought, linear illusions like time. We believe in the past, present, future, but if you really try to define it, you can't, because the mere thinking of an event in the future is bringing it into the present. So if you really try to, it's like mercury. If you try to hold it, it squishes out, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you try to really define time, really, truly, scientifically, you can't.
Mm.
It's like if I do this, that sound, is it present? Is it future? Or is it past? You can't define it because, yeah, it happened, but you can still hear it in your mind, right?
Mm.
And as the conversation goes on, you're still hearing it. Where do you put that? So the idea of another dimension, let's say the consensus, especially in the spiritual communities, is that we're going to become light beings. We're going to sprout wings. We're going to go higher and higher, and we're going to be only in love and light. And the Sirians don't go there. They're trying to explain to us that another dimensional realm, first of all, before you get to that light stage, there's this little thing called facing your karma. Because from the corruption and negative environment in which the human race finds itself at this moment, I don't see how we're going to make this giant leap into a dimension where we're all one with the guru. So the council say that the fourth dimension is a clearing station. It's where you confront your karma. It's, first of all, it's the disappearance of time as you understand it. And in this realm of ambiguity of time, you're faced with things that you think were past lives or past events that are right in your face because your understanding of time has shifted. And in this dimension, you will face the karma that you have collected and that we as a civilization have collected from time immemorial. So the council say, look around you, everything that's happening right now, it's like every single war, every evil, every good, everything on this planet is coming up. The insanity that we are facing right now, the war, the hatred, all of it is like millennium of the warring human race, as well as the wonderful Renaissance, the wonderful Atlantean high societies, Egypt, etc. It's all coming up. Okay. And this is indicative of us already starting to enter this fourth dimension. And what they say, the councils in the new book, they say it's as if it's fluttering. This fourth dimensional vibratory field is fluttering across and back out, something like a wave. So you don't recognize it yet. And I think that's remarkable. I personally, I'm experiencing huge shifts in time, warps. Are you?
Not personally myself. I'm just a bit curious about how it would affect us as a society who works to a clock. You know, TikTok, get up at this time, go to work, whatever you do. It sounds like it's going to turn society on its head.
Well, let's thank you. That's a very good example, because the truth is, anybody you talk to says, I just don't understand where the time's gone. I hope you don't mind my British imitation, but it just
I was convinced.
Yeah, it's like, Patricia, I don't get it. There are not 24 hours in the day anymore. It's like I wake up and all of a sudden it's 6 p.m. It's like, where did the day go? And the truth is, a lot of us are experiencing a shift in our understanding of time. I mean, my day, I don't understand, huge blocks of time just disappear. 1 minute it's 9 o'clock, next minute it's 3 o'clock. It's like, what did I do? I haven't been traveling the multiverse. Where did this time go? And I'm going to give you a little example of what's been happening to me. I stayed in someone's house a couple of years ago because I was having my house rebuilt, and in this strange house, it was actually quite haunted, and a lot of strange goings on were happening there. But one day, she had the main house, and then she had a little cottage on the same property with a common driveway, which she let out for bed and breakfast, and I was renting the house for a whole month. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting in the house and I hear a car drive up the driveway. I hear people get out of the car. They're speaking Italian. So, it interests me because I've spent so many years of my life in Italy. I recognize the dialogue. The dialect is Venetian Italian. I mean, that precise. And because I know dialects and I recognize the sing-song beauty of the Venetian dialect. Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, I hear a baby screaming, the door's open, the husband says, you get the baby, I'll get the bags. And they're bickering, obviously tired from traveling. And they go up the stairs into the house. I hear them turn the key. The door creaks because it's an old house. In they go, and the door closes. So the next morning, the owner comes to she's got her arms, a bucket with cleaning supplies, and under her arm, she's got sheets. And she knocks on the door and she goes, hey, I'm just about to go clean up the cottage. I was wondering if you'd, offer me a cup of coffee. And I said, oh, sure. I said, I heard the Italians come last night. She says, I'm sorry. I said, the Italians, I heard them. I wanted to say hello, but the baby was crying. She goes, Patricia, what the freak are you talking about? They're coming tonight. And I said, no. And then I felt all guilty because I thought, oh my God, maybe they came here, grabbed the key and snuck in a free night.
So it's like a time slip thing going on.
Yeah, your mind races for some kind of level of understanding that's common to your experience, right? So she's saying, how do you know they're Italians? I go, look, I don't want to make any trouble here. I said, but I did hear them arrive. I heard them speaking Venetian Italian. She said, that's right, they're from Venice. And I said, well, yeah, they're already here, sweetheart. I go, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. She goes, that's not possible. They don't have a key. So she goes storming out. And I follow her out. We go up the stairs. Nobody's there. Beds are completely unmade, mattress style. Nothing's ever happened. So she looks at me and says, what the hell did you see? And I said, I don't know. I have no explanation. It doesn't fit in any psychic faculty that I've ever used. So later that day, 5 o'clock, same exact time, I hear the car come in. I hear the voices, baby screaming, exact reenactment. Exactly. And when I opened and looked out, this time there were real people there. So that experience blew my mind because of a lifetime of psychic experiences. I've seen spirits and, all kinds of things, but I've never had a time slip like that. And it's happening to me. It's happened to me 2 more times. And I think that this is indicative of starting to experience the 4th dimension where time mutates with you can't explain. Does it make sense to you what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a very clear version of deja vu.
No, it wasn't deja vu.
No, but I mean, in the same way that I would experience deja vu, I've heard this before. But yeah, you're on a completely different level from it. But that's the nearest I can put it to in my own experience.
Do you think that links it?
Deja vu may very well be just a pop out of your dimension into another one and back.
Yeah.
But this is a sequence. I mean, this is like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
What's your feelings on this and kind of the Mandela effect?
I don't understand the Mandela effect.
Do you want me to explain what it's about?
No, I know what it's about. When I say I don't understand it, it's like I have no point of reference about it because there's never been anything that I remember. When people recall things that they recall differently, I don't have any of those memories, personal experience. So I don't have any reference about Mandela experience. But yes, I think that there's time slipping here, or group conscious. I don't know. I'm not quite sure about what that experience is, but this is time slip. You want another one?
Tell you what, let's take a break and we shall resume after these messages with Patricia Cori.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. TalkStream Live, now available in the iTunes App Store.
And welcome back, Mr. Trump. How did you find the black hole?
Well, I found there's no evidence of Russian collusion there, just an empty void. So instead I listened to Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Hello, welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show with Neil Geddes-Ward and Andy Chaplin, and we are chatting to Patricia Cori, who is speaking to us not only about the Sirian Revelations, a series of books she's been channeling over the past number of years, but also about time slips and how time is perhaps moving into the 4th dimension. And she gave us an example there in part 1. So, Patricia, you was about to give us a second example of a time slip. If you want to carry on that, because it sounds very intriguing.
Okay. I was recently in Norway on a semi-vacation, and in Bergen, I was going to board a cruise. So the night before I was taking this cruise, I realized I wanted to have that little device, a remote clicker for the camera, so that you don't move the camera when you snap.
Oh, yeah, a trigger type of thing.
Trigger, yeah. And my rationale for this was if I'm going to capture the northern lights, which is why I was there, I don't want to blur the image. So let me get this. I called it the clicker. So I go to the little town, and lo and behold, there's a camera shop, and it's completely dead. It's like 6 o'clock in Bergen, everybody is in La La Land. Everything closes at 5. So there's nothing, the shop is closed. There's no lights anywhere. The town is off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also because I suppose it's very cold in Norway and people go home early to home. So I made a note, okay, great. I'll just come here tomorrow morning before I board the ship. And I see Nikon, that's great. All right, great. So I get up in the morning, trudge through the snow, go to this shop, and I walk in. And before I can say hi, this man says, "Oh, you came back for the clicker?" And I really, honestly, it takes a lot to dumbfound me. I said, "I'm sorry," and he said, "The clicker. It was a Nikon." And he goes over to the wall and he's rifling through the little packages, and I'm just standing there like a moron. And he goes, "It was a Nikon, right?" I go, "Uh-huh." So he takes this little package off the wall and he said, "Will that be all? Or would you like the extension that'll give you more room to move?" And I said, "How did you know I wanted a Nikon? Sorry, I'm really having problems here." And he goes, "Well, I'm the man. You came in yesterday. I'm the guy that helped you. Don't you remember?" I go, "No, I was off the charts because first of all, I knew that this was not the moment to have a metaphysical, multi-dimensional conversation with this guy dressed up like a, Nordic ski champion. I figured he's going to be a little left brain, and I couldn't get my head around what was happening. So I just went, oh, all right. I said, "Yeah, of course. I think that," and I walked out. And I didn't sleep that night because I was thinking, okay, what happened? What happened here? Did he move into the future? Okay, there was no, because you understand, since you're about paranormal, that one of the with the lower energies, or let's say capacities psychically, is telepathy. So had he been inside the building and saw me and he'd shake his head, "No, I'm sorry, we're closed," he could have telepathically, a really good telepath could have picked up that I wanted, but that's a real long shot anyway, that I wanted a Nikon clicker, right? But to say it was me, don't you remember? I'm the one who helped you, with an attitude like, "What are you, some kind of a moron?" And I just was so dumbfounded. I laid in bed thinking, oh boy, it is, we're not in Kansas anymore here, folks. Because if this is happening where I cannot put into any framework, and maybe you have ideas of what took place in that encounter, other than he came somehow into the future and popped back. But that would not explain why he would be saying, "I'm the one who served you." You get my drift?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I still don't know what to think of that, other than to suggest that we're starting to see the mutation of the timelines of the space-time continuum, which we understand as past, present, future, but which is really more like, and I use this analogy in my talk in Awake and Aware conference, a series of treadmills that are going at different speeds. Imagine you have an infinite gym of treadmills, of people on the exact same type of treadmills, and they're all lined up perfectly, but they're all going different speeds.
Mm-hmm.
Or when you're on a treadmill and it kind of goes,
Yep.
it slips back.
Yeah.
And where do you put that in the metaphysical question about time? If you look at the treadmill as time, and it has that slip back.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd love this is real meat for us to chew on from the point of view of the metaphysical, multidimensional journey we're on, and what do these things represent?
It reminds me a little bit of the stories. I think we might have discussed it before, Andy, where people have sort of gone somewhere and they've seen a house or whatever, and seen people, Victorian house, and they go back there the next day and the whole thing's not there at all.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of stories are quite prevalent. I think.
Yeah.
Was it Carl Jung had an experience like that with a chapel and kind of a painted ceiling?
I don't know if you're familiar with Michio Kaku.
Oh, he's the scientist, the sort of Japanese American scientist, isn't he? That's a physicist. Yeah.
He writes he is one of the co-founders of the string theory. So one of the primo scientists bringing forward quantum physics. And I had the honor of having him on my show.
Mm.
And he put out a video where he showed a woman. It was a reenactment of a story, more than one story that had been told to him by people that were involved. This woman is walking through a mall in Los Angeles, and people keep walking right into her. And it's 1, it's 2, it's 3, it's 4, 5 people later, she starts to really freak out because they can't see her.
Huh.
Nobody says, excuse me, nothing. They keep walking right into her, and she freaks out. And Kaku explains that what's happened is she's somehow in another dimension that is so similar to 3D. And this is a very important point, that it's hard to discern that you're not still in it. But for some reason, whatever vibratory frequency she is resonating to, she can still perceive the structure of 3D, but she's not in it. How does that grab?
That reminds me, actually, it's a very interesting story. It reminds me of a story that was relayed to me some years ago by a nurse of a hospital on the South Coast. And she says, I know this story to be true because I spoke to the doctors who are involved in it. She goes, I don't normally talk about this kind of thing, but because I was there and I was on this kind of, let's talk about ghosties and ghoulies and that kind of stuff, she opened up a little bit. And basically she said that where she worked in this particular hospital, the seriously ill patients were on a certain level of the hospital, say floor 4 or floor 3, and the doctors and medics who were there to treat them were on the next level above. But all these patients were on heart machines, monitors, all the kind of technology that you need to kind of monitor these people, and they're on the literally dying, these people. And apparently she said that their pagers went off, and these 2 doctors and a medic ran down the stairs because it's far quicker to go down the stairs than take a lift. And as they ran down the stairs, they came to the second flight of stairs, and there, sitting on the stairs, was a patient sitting on the stairs, and she was moaning. And they said, what are you doing here? And she says, my stomach really hurts. It really hurts. And they said, well, you shouldn't be here. You should be back in bed. Look, we've got to go and see a patient, but we'll send someone to help you, okay? Don't go away. And they carried on running down to where they'd been called to. And as they go to the bed where this patient has crashed or died or whatever, they see it's the very same girl. And so, in other words, that this girl apparently died, and her spirit or soul or whatever you want to call it, her life force, has ended up in the stairwell, and she's interacting as a spirit, if you like, with our 3D world by sitting on the stairs, is visible to the medics for a brief period of time, and she's holding her stomach, saying it really hurts. Which I suspect could be something to do with the solar plexus and the astral cord, if there is such a thing. Maybe it ties in with that. I don't know. And then when they went back there to the stairwell, she wasn't there. But it's almost as if her spirit had come out, resonated with this world to a certain extent, frequency-wise, and then went into another dimension, if you want to call it that, the spirit world or astral plane or whatever, But it kind of, that's a similar sort of thing. I think what it reminds me of that story.
It's similar, but not exactly, from the point of view that there's a death involved. So
yes, a permanent death.
Cross over, my experience of people who've crossed over is that immediately after the crossing, they're still retaining. Many times they're not understanding what's happened to them. They're still resonating, emanating their physical form.
So she might not even know that she's dead.
Exactly right.
The woman in the shopping mall, you mean? Or the no, the girl.
The girl on the stairs.
She doesn't know she's dead yet. And so, her spirit has moved into the stairs, and she doesn't know she's dead yet.
Yeah.
And they can see her because, sometimes when people, especially when they first pass over, they're still retaining quite a powerful aura. It's quite visible.
Patricia, has your Syrian channelings dwelled or spoken about anything to do with the light and the trap that's in place to kind of reincarnate souls forcibly back on Earth?
No, they haven't, but I have my own opinion about that. Very strong opinion,
Go
and
for it.
because I've had 2 near-death experiences,
Go for it.
and both times I was feeling that incredible. It's not just seeing light; it's being embraced in the most extraordinary love that you can fathom. It's beyond anything you can fathom. It's beyond your concept of a God or creation or love eternal. It's so huge. This can't be artificial.
Okay, but
And
do you think there is an artificial version of it that does gravitate towards some souls?
no, I think that when you pass over, you the first thing that happens is you have this complete recollection of all your karma, and the more darkness you see, the dimmer the light.
Right.
That the grief of all the things you've done in that moment passes before you and the light dims. I don't adhere to this idea that somebody's shining a light to capture your soul. I don't believe that. I just can't even imagine that we're also powerless, which is the mantra that's being produced to the human race at all times. You're powerless. Forget it. You're trapped. And by the way, don't even think about the fact that when you pass over, you're free, because we got you there too. And no, I don't believe that.
Okay.
And it's been my experience that both times it's just been this if only I could explain what this is like, this all embracing love and beauty. I can't wait to go. I really, having had this 2-time experiences, I can't wait for my time.
That's a very common statement to make, actually, because I've just
Yeah.
recently been watching about near-death experiences, which seem to me, the near-death experience seems very different from the actual death experience when you finally go, because the reports seem to be different from mediums that have communicated with people that have actually died and come back after their death to report what their transition was like. A lot of them don't talk about a tunnel of light. My own mum just said that her mum was waiting there in the corner of the room for her. She said there was no tunnel of light. She just went with her mum. But people who seem to have a short experience of the threshold of the spirit world, if you want to call it that, seem to go through a tunnel of light where they see their relatives at the end, or there's a garden or something like that. So,
Well, I think that tunnel represents something like the astral cord.
yeah, maybe
And
that's
it's not
where it's got
broken yet.
confused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not broken yet. So your spirit is detaching, your spirit body is detaching from the physical body and moving through the astral cord. But then it snaps back like a rubber band. And when you hear this voice, no, it's not your time. Or in my case, I heard a voice say, your mother, it's not time for you to leave your mother. And I popped back because I loved her so much. Right. But I think that might be the difference. It's like when it's real death, you sever the astral cord. So that cord is like a tunnel, isn't it?
So this spirit world that we all go to, if our Earth is going to move into a 4th dimension along with the rest of the solar system, what happens about our normal transition to a spirit world as we die if we're moving into another dimension anyway? How does all that tie in with that?
That's a very good question, and I'm not quite sure there's an answer for it, because when people ask me similar questions, my answer is, well, how do we define the difference between death and ascension anyway? In fact, there's a chapter in my book called Death versus Ascension. And what I come up with is, if the planet, for sake of simplifying this, instead of talking about the sun, let's talk about the planet. If planet Earth is indeed ascending to a higher dimension, what does that mean for all the souls that are here? And obviously, in this extreme duality, there must be some kind of bifurcation where not all the souls reach the same frequency. How does this work? And there have been people like Dolores Cannon who talked about Earth splitting into 2 Earths, and the darker Earth would be where the lower souls go. And I don't adhere to that either. I think that everything is resonance and vibrational frequency. And if the Earth is moving into the fourth, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better or higher as we interpret that to mean. It means that it's a different set of terms vibrationally that we have to acclimatize to. So this is really important because people perceive other dimensions as better and higher. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a growing consensus from channels that we're going to pop to the fifth dimension. And the council say, well, wait a minute, what about the fourth? The fourth dimension is your spiritual clearinghouse, which is not unlike purgatory, Dante's Inferno, crossing through the gates of hell, and very many religious terminologies talk about the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, talk about this having to get past this field, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I understand that to be the fourth dimension. So that, in other words, if the whole planet is going into the fourth dimension, then all of us are, the difference between death and ascension may very well be that all beings on this planet are going to be faced with collective karma as well as their own karma. And I think that's what we're going through right now.
How many dimensions do you think there are in total?
I don't think there's a limit. So when I hear these scientists say there are 10, even Michio Kaku, who I adore, he said there are 10 dimensions. I was like, really? And how did you decide that? Because if you're a three-dimensional dweller, you can't perceive. You can't possibly perceive of dimensions beyond your three-dimensional awareness or your four-dimensional awareness or whatever. Like when you're using the psychic faculty, you're accessing information from another, let's say, level or source or vibratory signature. But who's to say how many levels of those there are? Could be infinite. So I don't agree with there are 10, there are 9, there are 8. It's like,
I think that's as far as they've worked out, as far as their ruler can stretch in this reality, because I think it was in the Seth books that he said that when you try to measure your universe and the reality you're in, you'll always get a distorted answer back because you're trying to measure it with the very instruments that the universe is part of, which is distorted anyway. So you're measuring a bent universe with a bent ruler type of thing, and you're never going to get a true answer.
That's it's so comparable to the information that I have. It's the Sirians say you're trying to establish rules of a metaphysical universe using rules that are partially correct in a physical universe.
Yeah.
Your rules are bending all the time. So how can you possibly use those rules to analyze, dissect, and measure a multidimensional framework that you have no knowledge of?
That's right. So, the 10 dimensions mentioned earlier is probably just as far as that they can see with the power of their equations, their structure that they're using.
Except that those equations are so limited. So even if they're using those equations to hypothesize 10 dimensions, they're equations that are valid in a three-dimensional context. Right?
Yeah.
So, for example, when you're in the seventh dimension, I'll bet you're going to see a heck of a lot more dimensions than you can from the third.
Yeah, and there won't be women in shopping malls bumping into people in that one, I guess.
I don't think so. Maybe universes colliding and then melting or something.
Well, one of the questions I was going to ask, if we're all going to reap the benefits of karma as we move into the fourth dimension for wars and all the sort of things we've done in the past, my question then would be the people of today, the younger people of today who weren't responsible for World War I or World War II, who weren't really responsible for the Iraq War or whatever, because, they had no say in it. But particularly the wars that happened before they were born, if we're going to start reaping the seeds of that karma, are they going to get a lot of trouble for something they weren't really involved in?
Well, but they're creating their own wars. I mean, we've got the whole gender issue. God forbid you use the wrong pronoun.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, it's instant hatred. It's the hatred, the political hatred of politicians who anybody with a modicum of understanding realizes that these are puppets. But the architecture of the political environment on the planet is to hate the players. And of course, a lot of my information is about understanding that there's a bigger, I mean, it goes back 20 years too. Remember that, the books that I've produced. So
Yeah.
the idea of a bigger secret government ruling these people is paramount to understanding what's going on. And yet you've got a young generation that hates a lot of things. So they're responsible for that hatred.
Have the Sirians kind of said how the hatred and the negativity could be quelled down or calmed down?
Well, the first thing they say is, we're not going to come and save you, so get that out of your mind. There aren't good aliens waiting to arrive in ships and save all the good people, because that is more disempowerment. And what we don't want to see is a broken human race migrating to another planet and destroying that one. So you have to save yourselves, number one. And sorry, I got off track. What was your exact question? Because I got emotional.
How the human race can kind of quell down the negativity, and how we can change society to a more positive outcome.
I think that's of course a huge question, but the council say it's only when you're backed up against the wall that you finally take action. As long as life is complacent and easy, and you've got your chicken in the pot metaphor, you're not compelled to move. But when your backs are against the wall and your survival is threatened and your planet is threatened, then you move into action, and you are at that point.
That's the leverage point, as I say in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. There's a point where everything is against you, and that's when you, like you say, compelled to action. It's the last kind of stand, as it were, that you make.
Yeah, and I think that because I am even though I'm ultimately aware of all these forces, these evil forces, and all the attempts to just bring down the civilization, I am an ultimate optimist, and I believe that the human race will rise. And one of the motivators is because we're seeing the systematic destruction of this planet. And no matter how many problems individuals have, no matter how many emotional problems, family issues, sexual, drugs, whatever, very few people don't love the planet, don't love the earth, don't celebrate it in some way. Even if that's going to the beach with a keg of beer and getting drunk, you're still going to the beach. You don't want to go to a reservoir of petroleum spill. You want to go to a beautiful ocean. So there are levels of consciousness. There are those of us who protect the oceans, some of us who use the ocean, whatever. But one thing is common, and that is more and more people are understanding that the earth is under major attack and that we're called to action for the planet.
I'm leaving with the dolphins. That's my choice.
That's my choice too. And I said it in one of my interviews. I said it, and somebody said, "You're not suggesting a suicide call." And I said, "Of course not. I'm just suggesting that if it's time to go, I'm jumping back in."
So if there's the Sirians out there around the belt of Orion, which interestingly the Egyptians had a bit of an affiliation with that, didn't they? They focused their pyramids and built the pyramids in the shape of the belt of Orion, so it's alleged anyway.
Yes.
Is there do they talk about other races that are coming to our planet that, like Andy might say, dark forces? I mean, people talk about reptilians. Yeah, reptilians is the one I was thinking of.
Yes, they elucidate all of this information in the books. I'd really love for people to read it, because they even have compassion, which we need. For example, the Anunnaki, their reason for being here is because they're trying to survive. They're trying to save Nibiru from extinction. And it's quite an elaborate story to explain in this context. But if people are interested, they should really read Atlantis Rising. It is such an expose of why these beings are on the earth and what their agenda is. And their agenda is survival of their species. And several alien species that we're tormented with, that are brought forward by people like Carrie Cassidy, who is a wealth of knowledge regarding this field, is because they're trying to breed with humans, because we have wonderful genes, and they're trying to survive extinction. And the Sirians say we need to have compassion, because one commonality of all living beings is the will to live, the instinct to survive. And whether or not to do that is the abuse of other beings or not, it's primordial. And I think that's very profound. It helps me have compassion where I'd really like to scream like a maniac, and recognize that there are two primordial factors in every being. One is we all need love, whether or not people realize it or not sometimes, because they're so shrouded in darkness. And the other is we're all trying to survive. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Well, I would say the survival instinct ends where the enjoyment of causing pain and negativity kicks in.
Yeah, I agree.
Because then we're talking about ourselves.
We're talking about extremely damaged, just it's so beyond my perception why anyone would choose that path. I can't understand it. I just don't get it. Why, and especially knowing, or at least having an impression that I have about karma and what it means. If you choose to do this horrific stuff, what that means to your soul. Because I do believe in the immortality of the soul. And rather than thinking that we die and we go into this trap and we're thrown back into the pool of reincarnation, I believe that, I hate that word, believe. I perceive that what we're doing is more like a spiral rather than a circle, and that we go up higher, we learn lessons, we climb higher, the spiral of light, and eventually climb up this spiral to the point of no longer needing to experience biological life. And if your choice is darkness and cruelty and abuse and suffering, oh my God, you're going to go through more of it. It's going to come back to you a millionfold. And I have, I suppose, pity for these people, but not a whole lot, because when I think about anybody abusing a child, for example, I go ballistic. I mean, how anybody could hurt a child or an animal or another human being, it's just beyond my comprehension.
How do the Sirians, I mean, one of the things that come to mind is that they're coming through you to help us ascend to a fourth dimension. Why? I mean, there must be loads of races out there. Why have they just decided to help us? I mean, there must be other races, presumably they're kind of helping as well. Do they get a benefit from it in some way? I mean, is there a kind of a cooperative nature with each other in some way?
Again, described in the books, there was what they call the Syrian experiment hundreds of thousands of years ago at the birth of Homo sapiens. And according to the Sirians, we are the product of a genetic experiment, which is not unique to them. There are other people who are sharing that information. It's called the Syrian experiment, and they say that they brought in genetic material from different alien races into the pot, and also higher dimensional vibratory sparks and lights and whatever into the DNA fiber of this race that they call the 12-stranded master race, Homo sapiens, that then got diluted by other interference.
If we had all of our 12 strands activated right now, everyone on this planet, what do you think would happen?
Well, first of all, we would be a planet of Christed beings. And secondly, we would be in the Garden of Eden. But you see, the thing is, if that's a fact, I mean, if that's true information that we were designed to be that, and then we were taken down to 2, I wonder if there's some sort of divine plan that interrupted the Sirian experiment, because there has to be a journey for consciousness to take to achieve mastery, not to be born masters. Where's the point? Right? If there's nothing to achieve, you already achieved it at birth. Well, then what are you doing? What's your point for existing?
Yeah.
So I think, because the commonality is that the Anunnaki intervened and they stripped us of our DNA, and we hate them because they did that. And I'm thinking, or was that a part of a divine design to give us purpose for existing and to achieve mastery by growing and as a species, as individuals, to eventually rise to that higher awareness? In
Yeah,
fact,
I see,
there
I
are
see
there are
what you mean
some,
there, because it's because the whole point of living is to have some kind of purpose. If there was no purpose, there'd literally be no point in living. So there's got to
right.
be some purpose.
It's like the Garden of Eden. Seriously, if Adam and Eve just sat there being perfect and they didn't eat the apple, what would have been the point? Of course, we're talking metaphorical, and I'm not proposing any religious question here. I'm strictly talking about a fable. Okay.
So in terms of like going back to the question of what would happen, rather than the Garden of Eden as a concept, what would be the nuts and bolts of it? How would people change? What would happen? Like what would you actually see before your very eyes with people?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that
would they become more psychic? Would they become more compassionate?
I think if you look at Christ as a very possibly a 12-stranded being, that the ultimate expression of love, compassion, Buddha was one. There are several prophets that have walked the earth that have been highly, highly luminous. But in the end, they suffer. Buddha was asked by in one of the fables about the Buddha, he was asked by one of his disciples, can you explain to us, can you tell us what God is? And Buddha was silent for ever so long. And then he said, I cannot know what God is. It is beyond me. It is greater than my perception. I can tell you about suffering, though. Of that, I have much experience. And, the answer is, who knows? I can say this, we're seeing children coming in with the 3rd strand of DNA illuminated, and scientists are starting to be able to pick this up. I think there was a child in Russia that was seen with 3 strands of DNA. There's something happening here.
And what would be different about those particular kids?
Well, if you look at it strictly from first of all, these are genius kids who are just beyond anything that would define their age or ability. Brilliant children, strange eyes. And if you look at it from a geometry point of view, if you have a 3rd strand of DNA, then in a way you've resolved duality. If you look at it strictly from a sacred geometry point of view, the 3rd strand of DNA woven into the double helix creates triangulation, which is a lot about what the Sirians teach. And therefore, the nature of that 3rd strand is that it resolves the imbalance of duality. So perhaps these new children are coming in with a much different perception of 3-dimensional reality, because they have resolved the duality at the genetic level.
So would these be the indigo kids or the crystal kids?
Yes. Yes, I think so.
And what comes after them? I mean, let's say the human race goes in a positive direction, and the first wave is the indigo kids. What would be the subsequent waves?
Don't know.
Yet to see.
Yeah,
Watch
I
this
mean,
space.
we could be, we coined the expression indigo children. The council talk about the violet oversoul. But the point is that the more light there is at the genetic level, the more these pieces are attached, reassembled, the more the human being is capable of achieving mastery. For example, remember also that they talk about junk DNA, 85%. They talk about gray matter in the brain, that we're only using 80 or 85% of our brain. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, oh, gee, funny how we're not using our brain 85% of that, and we're not using our DNA 85% of that. I wonder if they're connected. And I truly believe that it's like the old-fashioned telephone plug-in connecting walls that telephone operators used to plug you in.
Yeah.
I think that
Switchboard.
I think that we're going to be seeing even more of us plugging in that dormant DNA and lighting up the neural networks of our brain. Of course, now that opens up a whole nother subject, which is artificial intelligence, because they're trying to do it artificially.
I got a very bad feeling about AI.
I do too. And I think that one of the reasons why they want to dumb us down is because if we plug it in ourselves, it's illumination. If it's plugged in by artificial intelligence, it's domination.
Yeah, totally controlled.
Yeah, I don't like it. And I am a big advocate for staying as far away from technology as you can.
They were talking on another of the Paranormal UK radio stations shows. It's Mac Maloney's Military X-Files. I listened to it. It's a good show for those that are interested in the military and UFOs. Take a listen to it. But they were actually talking recently, I was listening to it, about the technology that's coming out in the United States now, where they've got artificial intelligence, drones that will shoot down other drones and fight each other, so it almost supersedes a soldier. And they're calling these craft, if you like, or drones, these military devices that go out and find each other and hunt each other down and shoot each other. They're calling them skyborgs, which is very Terminator-ish sounding, isn't it?
Oh my God.
It gets worse. It gets worse. So guess who else wants to start using the drones? The military and the police. So they're talking about taser drones. Okay,
I've
so
heard about
drones
that.
are going to hunt down criminals and taser them. But it gets worse than that. Now, there was a kind of like a YouTube film about, it wasn't really in a documentary style. It was kind of fiction, but showing what could happen. And basically the idea was you would have very, very small drones, tiny drones with lethal injections, kind of like mosquitoes. And you'd flood these towards an enemy with these little syringe needles full of lethal injections, and basically kill people like flies and mosquitoes would kill people if they could do. And this was kind of presented as kind of like a fictional dystopia of the future, but we're actually getting to the point where this is feasible. This could be a thing.
Well, they've already got robotic mosquitoes that are spreading West Nile virus.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole kind of Dr. Evil spinning globe with a high back leather chair and white fluffy cat scenario could be, what if one day they decide to release all of these and literally kill 90% of the world's population, except for the elitists who have all got a chip saying, don't kill me.
Would it be easier to do it with gas?
This could be an actual reality. And we would know nothing about it until these little insects turn up and you're like, what the hell is that? And then zap, you're gone.
Well, because first of all, that is a frightening scenario. I'm not going to make light of it. However, I would like to draw attention to two things. One, I don't want to be with the elite misery, satanic reptilian force that remains alive.
True.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
And two, if it's my time to go, I'm so out of here.
Yeah, I agree. That seems. I mean, if they want to take over the planet and run it as a misery floating raft in space where all these other creatures are trying to grab onto the raft and basically take each other over, then who wants to hang around with those guys?
Yeah, which is a very important subject for us to move to, which is immortality. And that is that if you understand and believe in the immortality of the soul, you're not clinging to life. You're not terrorized by all of these possibilities because you know that, okay, let's see what's on the next level, the next side. And again, for those people who have had the privilege of near death, you know, this is I really want to put this out to you. There's no boasting here. I'm not trying to know more than anyone else. I just want to share a very deep and personal experience. And that is having been on that other side and come back and having known the bliss of it. I know without question, personally for me, that we don't die.
Mm-hmm.
So it completely changed my perception of being on this planet now. I have no fear of that process because I'm kind of can't wait. I mean, the first time was unbelievable. The second time, I was swimming away with the dolphins. It was when I went in the water with the dolphins. I was there for so long, and the captain of the boat was going, I've never seen dolphins behave like this. And he said, "Are you tired?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good." And I'd go back, and all of a sudden, at one point, I remember myself thinking, this is how I go out. In the euphoria of being surrounded by dolphins and the music and the clicking and the whole thing. And I started to slip away. And somebody jumped into the water off the boat and grabbed me by the hair and pulled me back. And I was annoyed because I knew I was going. So in this scenario of these alien, because obviously this is alien technology, you don't go from black and white television to robotic drones in a couple of decades, right? My feeling is, if it's time for me to go, quite honestly, I really believe that when you're in soul essence and you decide to come into this lifetime, you choose the parents, you choose the place, you choose the time, and you already know when you're going out. That's a personal belief of mine. So I feel like whether it's mosquitoes that inject me or if I step off the highway or the street and get hit by a car, that's already preordained.
It could get into even more complicated territory when we're talking about parallel dimensions and infinite realities simultaneously occurring.
Yeah, because I was... Can you imagine? Okay, Michio Kaku has been described as the Einstein of our time. And here's little me hosting him for an hour and a half interview. And I was intimidated because I thought, how am I going to hold up to this brain? This is going to be interesting. And it was very easy because Kaku has a wonderful way of being able to impart knowledge that's easy to understand. At any rate, he was talking about the different theories that are popular right now, because he was talking about the Big Bang theory is being usurped by other theories. And he said, for example, there's the... I laughed because the scientist with a dry presentation of something that's very funny, because he said something like, there's the big splat theory. Well, I don't really adhere to that. I go, yeah, let's go right over that. And then he said the bubbling universe theory. And he described this as this. He said, we're looking at now, we quantum physicists are looking at the idea that maybe there was no big blast, big initial. Maybe there is just this continuum that we can't define. And that the universe is nothing more than a continual, perpetual bubbling up of galaxies and physical universes. And that there's some force. Let's talk jacuzzi. I go, okay. And he says, it's like, bubbles in a jacuzzi. And he said, let's call the force that is running the jacuzzi, let's call that God or creator or whatever. And I said, I love the way he just breezed right over that. And he said, and as these bubbles bubble up, they're connected by a film. A lot of them are like globs of bubbles, all connected by different film of the outer of the bubble. And he said, so if you're if that film would be a 7 billion mile galaxy, for example. He said you could, from the soul essence point of view, exist in both of the bubbles if you're in that film. Do you understand me, Patricia? I go, yeah, I'm with you. So he said, so you're in that film between the two bubbles. So that could very well be what simultaneous reality is. And I, always the metaphysician, said, okay, Dr. Kaku, but what's in the space between the film? And he said, that's the question that's going to drive us out of our minds.
Yeah.
Like, you got the bubble, you got the film, I can do that. But what about that gaseous emptiness in between? And that was his answer. That's the question that's going to drive us all out of our minds.
Maybe consciousness.
Exactly.
I attempted to read a book by Michio Kaku some years ago, and it was called Other Worlds, if I recollect.
Yes.
Where he's talking about parallel universes, parallel dimensions, that type of thing. And I got the impression from my limited understanding of quantum physics, the way he was wording this was almost as if he's almost describing a spirit world possibility, but without saying the word spirit. Because he says, are there inhabitants of this other place? We don't know, And I thought, hang on a minute. But, those of us that are into mediumship and do the afterlife communication, we've got evidence of that. We believe that we're in contact with these other inhabitants, friends, relatives, whatever, spirits in another dimension. And he's touching and talking about it, but he's just not calling it the same name. And it's almost like with science, they just don't want to say the spirit word.
Well, because you lose your cred if you start talking woo-woo. But what he said to me was, he said, early on, he speaks so matter-of-factly. Early on as a child, he said it was quite difficult because I'm Japanese and I was raised a Buddhist. On the other hand, when I was 14, I was building my first nuclear reactor.
As you do.
As one does, exactly.
Yeah, when you go to school and they say, Michu, you haven't handed in your homework of your nuclear reactor. Oh, sorry, it's a bit late.
He's really very tongue in cheek. But what he was saying was, it's very hard for me to, as a scientist, I understand the Big Bang Theory, and we're looking always for and he's using all this scientific language like the catalyst and all that stuff. And he said, on the other hand, I was raised a Buddhist, and we believe that there, in the all that is, ever was, and always will be. I'm like, oh, you're talking my language here, Dr. Kaku. And then he'd pull back. But scientifically, and the reason is because he has to retain credibility in the scientific community to do what he does. And he's already on the border. But I have seen him of late talk more company line than he was back in the day when I had him on.
Company line?
Yeah.
So he's talking more like
a scientist.
Yeah, maybe he's got a grant coming up that he's got to apply for.
Well, yeah, because let's be honest, these people have government grants. Universities are funded by governments, and so if you get
so he can't say I'm researching ghosts. He's got to say I'm looking into alternate dimensions and realities.
Look at Tesla. He went against the grain, and they drove him insane. But Michio Kaku has contributed a wealth of information. And even that video that I'm talking about, which I'm sure you can find on the internet, he was presenting some pretty interesting alternative thinking there. He was talking about how the dimensions are all intertwined, which is my stance as well. We think about the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, up and away balloon land. And he was saying these dimensions are all intertwined, and you can slip into one without knowing it. It's not like you have this grand ascension revelation. The next thing you know, you're in a higher dimension.
Seth actually says, again, going back to Seth, he said no system is closed. They're all intertwined. So it's exactly the same thing, really, isn't it?
I love that you're so versed in Seth. That's wonderful.
Oh, well, I've read quite a few Seth books. Started off with Seth Speaks and worked my way through various volumes of the unknown reality, the nature of personal
The
reality.
nature of personal
Yeah,
reality.
yeah,
Wonderful.
got a worn out paperback of that somewhere. And then I've just recently lent the last Seth book to a medium stroke author, Philip Kinsella, who's writing his own book, and he's very into the Seth stuff as well. And I've lent him the last book, which I think was called The Way Toward Health, the very last Jane Roberts book, where it's almost like a diary of her passing away, almost virtually. It's quite an emotional book to read because it's her dying days in hospital with her husband by her side, and she's still channeling Seth from a hospital bed. Would you believe? It's quite an interesting read if you ever get
Well,
a.
that's
your hands
wonderful too, because that meant that he was right with her when she was passing through.
Yeah, yeah. It was a bit of a weird book because one hand he was saying you will get better, you will go and sit on your back porch again in your rocker, in a rocking chair, but he was kind of wrong at the end because she died. So whether he was seeing another dimension of her doing it or another reality, alternate reality, probability, but she still decided to phase out of this world. So yeah, very, very
Well,
controversial in that sense.
I think there may very well also be some free will even in the death process.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. He says everyone chooses their own way of dying and their own point
Yeah.
of death, and it's always down to the individual, even if it's a subconscious thing.
Because I mean, let's say that, doctors always say that the element that determines why some people make it through and others don't is the will to live.
Interesting.
Every doctor will say that. Surgeons say that all the time, that's the piece that they can't account for. And if she had lost her will to live, then she might have very well altered the reality that he saw.
Yes.
So she wanted to go be with him.
Have you ever heard Seth talking, Patricia, as in when Jane was doing it?
No.
You should check out YouTube.
Going back to your comment about theatrics, if you go onto YouTube and put in Seth, Jane Roberts talking with Seth, he's very, very, very theatrical. When you read the books and you listen to how he's talking, it's very bizarre.
Very different, because as my mate said, we were talking about this some years ago. He said, had we had seen the Seth on YouTube or TV without seeing a book, we would have switched off.
Correct. Correct.
Well, that's exactly what I mean about the theatrics.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's a turn off. And then, like you said, had we not read the books, because that is some of the most impeccable information available.
Indeed. So what I'm bringing this up for is to say, if Bashar is kind of a turn off for you, maybe read Bashar channelings, and maybe you'll have a different perspective on it without the theatrics.
I would, but the only thing is I don't read other channel material.
Yeah.
But when I say theatrics, it isn't meant to offend Bashar. I'm just saying that my personal reaction, like the person that you just mentioned, to the theatrical is, oh please. I get blocked by the theatrical presentation.
Why do you reckon they do that? What's going on there?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. Bashar, for example, I don't understand why there's the screaming, but maybe that's just the force.
It hurts.
Yeah, it. Perhaps the being that he's bringing through is overly emphatic because he's able to get through a human being. I really don't know about that.
I mean, for instance,
I've got a theory about it. Okay, all right. Let's go to microphones and bands and things like that. And you're on stage, and occasionally you have your mic up, and suddenly you get feedback, and it's just too powerful, and you have to move away from the mic, or they turn down the volume a little bit, or whatever it is, and the thing goes down. And these beings, these energized beings, are coming step down transformers from other universes, if you like, down into the individual, and each individual's got their own little frequency or whatever it is, and they're constantly coming through and they're booming away, and they got to turn down the thing, otherwise they're going to do a bit of feedback as well. And I think what they do is that each channel has to learn to match their energy to the higher being, and it's constantly being adjusted in the same way that, like, when you're watching TV on the internet, like your Netflix, when you switch it on, you're seeing it and it's all slightly blurry for a little bit. And what's happening is the servers and the computers and things that run Netflix are constantly monitoring your internet speed, and then they're starting to adjust for it and tweak it within about a minute, and then your picture goes pin sharp, or should do anyway, as it constantly finds out what speed you're operating on. And my analogy, I think, is similar, I hope, to these channels that are booming through some of these mediums. And you know, like Jane Roberts, she would be very forceful on some days, and very loud, and other times it was very slow and methodical. And I think it was just a case of how much Seth would come through, and also because of Jane Roberts' ill health, that might have had something to do with it, how much he could push through the information. That's my guess anyway.
That's a very good explanation. Beautiful. You know, the bottom line is it is incredible work to be a medium. And everyone is going to have, especially when you're channeling such forceful things. It's one thing to channel a spirit that's gone over, that doesn't take so much energy, as channeling in hours and hours of a committee or beings on these higher levels of reality. And at the bottom line is, however you're able to do that, I celebrate you. I just personally, it's a turnoff for me when I say a turnoff, it just pushes me away from wanting to pay attention when it's very theatrical. But if I were to read the information, that would be another discussion.
I'll give you a little impression of how Jane Roberts channels Seth. It would be something like, "You need to find your own reality."
Yeah.
I don't think I'll.
She said that's kind of fairly similar, Neil.
Yeah.
I don't think I will go see that, because I hold the memory of decades ago when I read Seth Speaks.
I've got the Seth books, and I'm actually halfway through one at the moment, and it's good information, and it's a great read. And then you view it on YouTube and you think it's just the same thing.
Because
that's my point. That's what I mean about the theatrics.
Yeah, you imagine the voice in your head of Seth, and then you look at YouTube and think, "Oh my God, I was so far off."
Or not.
Yeah.
Or not. Hold on, because perhaps in the reading you're connecting with the frequency, the vibratory signature of that information, and to have someone then interpret that with the dramatic voice, somehow it's still her interpretation. Because, how do I say this? When I'm channeling, what I'm really picking up is bubbles, thought bubbles that are coming into my vibratory zone where I can connect with them. Okay. And then I assemble or reassemble these thoughts into patterns. It's a like you said earlier, it's a combination of two, the ascender and the receiver, intending to communicate thought into language. When you read it, you're involved with the frequency of the words, and your experience is important to the interpretation of the read. And perhaps that's more important than listening to her do the theatrical impression.
Yeah,
maybe these beings have just got very strong energies, and maybe they have kind of a mindset. If they're going on for hours on hours, they don't want people to fall asleep, and they've got important points to put across. So the theatrics kind of keeps the interest,
wakes them up a bit.
Wakes them up a little bit, maybe.
Maybe.
Well, we're coming to the very end now of our show, Patricia. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's gone really quickly. It's been very interesting.
It's been wonderful. I've really, really been very comfortable and really enjoyed your wisdom.
Well, thank you for taking part. So, where can people find out more about you?
My website is Patricia Cori, CORI.com. I also have a website that's SirianRevelations.net. And to be honest, I'm kind of all over the internet. I've done so many interviews. So if you want to find me, you can. And the name of my new book is The New Sirian Revelations, which is kind of popular right now and bring you up to date on the latest information the Sirians are bringing through to the relevant moment, which is now. What's happening now and how they perceive us moving through it. It's a really important book. So
Brilliant.
hopefully people, you can get it everywhere.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much indeed from Andy and myself.
Thank you
And
both.
everybody here on the Paranormal Peep Show and the Paranormal UK Radio Network. So, everybody, if you're interested, find out more from Patricia Cori from her websites and look for her books on Amazon on the Sirian connections. Thank you very, very much indeed. And you've been listening to the Paranormal Peep Show, and we shall see you next month.
See you later.